Guys, I'm accepting or admitting the others. Sorry. Okay. So I have 17 students in the room so far. Just share the screen. Okay. There are 18. Ahmed El-Kiki. So I have Matar, Peter, Danielle, Gamal, Basant, Samar, Dahrug, Jana, Luigi, Maya, Mashali, Yauta, Mirna, Minna, Muhammad Al-Kiki, Salma, and Omar. Okay. Other people, maybe.
Mister, can't you see me?
Yes,
I'm Yauta.
I said your name. I said your
Okay,
name.
I didn't hear it.
So in the first session, I had these. Yes, in the first session, Mariam didn't attend, Karim didn't attend, and there is a third, another person. I don't remember his or her name. I'll know him or her name. Okay. So in the first session, I had 24 attendees. I had 3 absentees. كان في الفيرست سيشن كان مريم وكريم وحد ثالث هبقى اعرفه بعدين. Okay, now you are 19, and we're talking about the prologue of the Canterbury Tales. And let me ask you, what is the purpose of the prologue? Why is Geoffrey Chaucer writing the prologue?
I'm sorry, but Miriam called me saying that she does not have internet in her house right now.
She sent me a message and said she's going to school to do something. No problem. I know.
Yes, but she also does not have internet.
Yes, I just said that she didn't attend. No problem. So what is Geoffrey Chaucer trying to do in the prologue, guys? The prologue is the introduction to the Canterbury Tales. We have 24 tales, 24 stories told by the characters or the pilgrims who are going to Canterbury to visit the tomb of Saint Thomas a Becket, a man who was murdered in 1170, and they thought that he could heal their, let's say, or help them with their health. So what is Chaucer trying to do? I have 2 raised hands. Hanya, Ibrahim. Okay. Of course, Luigi and Minna. Okay, Luigi, go ahead. What is Geoffrey?
He described every single person?
Yes. He takes them one by one. Describes how he looks internally and externally, outwardly and inwardly. The clothes, how he looks or she looks, and the character. The character from inside. She's kind, she's vain, he's humble, and so on. Thank you very much, Luigi. Okay, so we read his description of the knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, and the squire is the knight's son. And the third person was the yeoman. The yeoman, if you remember, the yeoman was like an attendant or a servant who attended or served the knight and his son. I think we stopped here. For he could dress his gear in yeoman style, his arrows never drooped. I think we passed this part. Yeah, we stopped here, I think. Line 116. A jaunty dirk, spear sharp and well equipped, as you can see. in the picture on the left here, a medal of Saint Christopher he wore of shining silver on his breast, which we can see here. I'm not sure. These are buttons. Okay. And bore a hunting horn, well slung and burnished clean, that dangled from a baldric of bright green. Baldric is something in which he or they used to carry their swords or put their swords. Okay. He was a proper forester, I guess. Then, at the turn of the nun, this is the fourth character. Geoffrey Chaucer describes in his prologue. There also was a nun, a prioress. If we go to the definition of a prioress, it was here we have prioress in an abbey, in something like a nunnery or a monastery. The nun ranking just below the abbess was called the prioress. So it was a high rank in the clergy, a religious woman, a nun, a prioress. Her way of smiling very simple and coy. Her greatest oath was only by Saint Loy. This is how she gave her oath, and she was known as Madame Eglantine. Nada, welcome. Nada. Okay. Is Shah Tamim with us in the room? Sorry. Shah Tamim.
Yes, Mister.
Is Farah with us?
Here يا مستر موجودة.
Okay, thank you. Mariam is here now. Mariam joined us. Okay. So I have 26 students now. We have one absentee only. I'll check later. Okay. So the woman, again, well, she sang a service with a fine intoning through her nose. She, a service here means a prayer. She said a prayer or recited a prayer with a fine intoning through her nose, as was most seemly, and she spoke daintily in French. You know, French have many nasal letters, or which we call nasal. You know, you use your nose a lot when you speak in French. Extremely after the school of Stratford at Bow, French in the Paris style, she did not know. Let's say maybe he wants to say that she was vain. She was trying to, or she was showy, maybe. At meet, her manners were well taught withal. No morsel from her lips did she let fall. She didn't let any small piece of meat when she eat, nor dipped her fingers into the sauce too deep. She was polite. She tried to look polite. She was showy, but she could carry a morsel up and keep the smallest drop from falling on her breast. For courteousness, she had a special zest. She was courtesy. She was polite. And she would wipe her upper lip so clean that not a trace of grease was to be seen upon. She didn't leave any food remains on her mouth or on her lips. Upon the cup when she had drunk to eat, she reached a hand sedately for the meat. She certainly was very entertaining, pleasant, and friendly in her ways. So she is a pleasant woman. Try to underline if you have the books, or if you have, you can write down notes. She was pleasant, friendly in her ways, and straining to counterfeit a courtly kind of grace. She was showy. This was not her nature. He wants to say this. She was trying to counterfeit or fake a courtly kind of grace, a stately bearing fitting to her place, and to seem dignified in all her dealings. As for her sympathies and tender feelings, she has some tender feelings. She was so charitably solicitous She showed concern even to animals, as we will see. What did she do? She used to weep if she saw a mouse caught in a trap. She would weep for the mouse. She sympathizes with the mouse caught in a trap. If it were dead or bleeding, or if it were dead or bleeding, when she sees a dead mouse or a bleeding mouse or a trapped mouse, she would weep for it. And she had little dogs. She would be feeding with roasted flesh or milk or fine white bread. And bitterly, and she was solicitous. She showed care for even animals. And bitterly she wept if one were dead or someone took a stick, one of the dogs, a stick and made it smart. She was all sentiment. She was full of feelings and tender heart. Her veil was gathered in a seemly way. She was veiled. She was, nuns or prioresses wear veils. Her nose was elegant. Her eye glass gray, or her eyes glass gray. Uh, Her mouth was very small, but soft and red. He's describing her body now. Her forehead certainly was fair of spread. She had a big forehead, the forehead at the front of your head, almost a span, about 20 centimeters. A span is the distance between the end of your little finger to the end of your thumb. Almost a span across the brows. I own she was indeed by no means undergrown. Uh, Her cloak, I noticed her cloak, let's say, clothes, I noticed had a graceful charm. She wore a coral trinket on her arm, a set of beads, the goddess tricked in green, whence hung a golden brooch of brightest sheen, on which there first was graven a crowned A and lower amor vincit omnia, which means, if we go, this is Latin. If we go down, amor vincit or vincit omnia means love conquers all. She had something like this, or wore something like this. Another nun. So this is the first nun, a prioress. We have another nun, but the other nun is not important, and she doesn't tell a story, I think. The chaplain at her cell was riding with her, and 3 priests as well. So this prioress, this important clergy woman, had another nun with her. Okay, the chaplain at her cell, the chaplain is something like the attendant also, was riding with her, and 3 priests as well. There were 3 priests with her. Who rode the country? Hunting was his sport. The next character is a monk, and this is an important character. The monk was interested in hunting. And monks should stay in the monastery and not go out or be interested in such lively things, right? Many people criticized the monk for this, but he enjoyed it. A monk, there was one of the finest, a monk, there was one of the finest sort who rode the country. Hunting was his sport. He was interested in hunting, but the monk was interested in hunting. Write this down, guys. A manly man, he was a man, to be an abbot able, many a dainty horse he had in stable. He had a horse, and the horse was dainty. His bridle, when he rode, a man might hear, jingling in a whistling wind as clear. Ay, saying to the horse, and as loud as does the chapel bell. His voice was harsh like a bill. Where my lord monk was prior of the cell, the rule of good Saint Bennet or Saint Maur, as old as strict he tended to ignore. He let go by the things of yesterday. He doesn't care about what happened in the past, and took the modern world's more spacious way. Again, he was interested in hunting the time monks weren't or shouldn't have been interested in hunting. He did not read that text at a plucked hen, which says that hunters are not holy men. So uh, people say hunters are not holy men. He's a holy person. He is a monk. A monk is a holy person, okay, or a religious person. So he shouldn't be a hunter. And that a monk uncloistered is a mere fish out of water. When the monk, people say that when the monk goes out of the monastery, he's like a fish out of water. But this monk goes out for hunting and doesn't care, flapping on the pier, as if we have a fish out of water flapping on the pier. You know, the pier is the structure stretching inside a body of water in the sea or something. It's made of wood most of the time or metal. That is to say, a monk out of his cloister, when the monk goes out of his place, that was a text he held not worth an oyster. He doesn't care about it. And I agreed, and I said his views were sound. So the narrator agrees with the monk. Or was he to study till his head went round? Is he supposed to stay in the monastery studying, reading, doing nothing, read until his head went round, as you can see in the picture, poring over books in cloisters? Must he toil as Austin bade until the very soil? Was he to leave the world upon the shelf? Let Austin have his labor to himself. Austin here is maybe Augustine, something like that. Let's see. Austin, English version of Saint Augustine, who criticized lazy monks. Okay. We'll move to this monk was therefore a good man to horse. Greyhounds he had, as swift as birds. You know, dogs help hunters catch, or which type of dogs, which are called retrievers. You know, retrievers, fetched boy, fetched girl. When a hunter catches a bird or something, or hunts a bird or something, he asks his dog to go and bring it. Fetched boy, fetched girl. As swift as birds to course, hunting a hare. A hare is a wild rabbit, or riding at a fence was all his fun. He spared for no expense. So he wasn't lazy. He wasn't sitting in his cloister in his monastery reading books only. No, he was an active man. I saw his sleeves were garnished. At garnished means decorated. At the hand with fine gray fur, as you can see, the finest in the land, and on his hood to fasten it at his chin, he had a wrought gold cunningly fashioned pin. This is describing his appearance. Into a lover's knot it seemed to pass. His head was bald and shone like looking glass. It's easy. So did his face, as if it had been greased. He was a fat and personable priest. His prominent eyeballs never seemed to settle. They glittered like the flames beneath a kettle. Supple his boots, his horse in fine condition. He was a prelate fit for exhibition. He was not pale, like a tormented soul, like all the monks. The writer wants, or the narrator wants to say that the monks who stay in the monastery doing nothing but reading books look pale because they don't see the sun, or because they are not active most of the time. He was not pale like a tormented soul. He liked a fat swan best and roasted whole. His palfrey was as brown as is a berry. Again, maybe he was tanned from being in the sun hunting for a long time. The next character is a friar, another religious person. So let's remember that the narrator started with the high class people, then he moved on to the clergy people. You know, clergy people or religious people or holy people were or belonged to the or had a high rank at that time. They were highly respected in Middle Ages. I think you agree. There was a friar, a wanton, one and merry, a limiter, a very festive fellow. In all four orders, there were, according to the footnote here, let's see the meaning of limiter. He was a limiter, a friar who is given begging rights for a certain limited area. So at that time, a friar is like a monk, okay, or a priest who was given the right to beg money from people, but in a specific area, in a limited area. He wasn't, or he was allowed to beg for food, for money, for whatever, in a limited area. This a person in this condition is called a limiter, a very festive fellow in all four orders. Here, the four orders, there were four orders of friars who supported themselves by begging. They lived in monasteries and they worshiped God. How would they live? By begging. These four orders or four types are the Dominicans, the Franciscans, Carmelites, and Augustinians. Okay, so he was maybe one of them. All four orders, there was none so mellow, so glib with gallant phrase and well-turned speech. He'd fixed up many a marriage, giving each of his young women what he could afford her. He was a noble pillar to his older, highly beloved and intimate was he. So what we know, what we need to know about the friar is that he begged money for a living or to earn his living with county folk within his boundary and city dames of honor and positions, for he was qualified to hear confessions. In Christianity, some people are qualified to hear confessions. If you are a sinner, if you have committed a specific sin, you can go to a priest or a friar like this and confess what you have done, and so on. So he said, with more than priestly scope, he had a special license from the Pope. He told people, maybe he was a liar, he told people that he had a license from the Pope to forgive people, which is called, I think, papal permission or papal something, or papal absolution, maybe. He had a special license from the Pope. And the Pope is the highest rank in the English or in the Christian religion. The Pope. Sweetly he heard his penitents, people who are sorry for or regretful people who go and confess their sins, and shrift with pleasant absolution. Absolution, when again, an absolution is an act of freeing someone of a sin or of a criminal charge. And if you absolute someone, I think he or she will give you some money for a gift. Yani this person was ready to offer absolution to anyone who would give him a simple gift. He was an easy man in penance giving. And once any person comes and confesses his or her sin in front of him, he forgives them, where he could hope to make a decent living. He was an easy person. He wanted to get some money to live. It's a sure sign whenever gifts are given to a poor order that a man's will shriven. Yani people are weak in front of money, and should he give enough, he knew in verity the penitent repented in sincerity. Okay, even if the penitent didn't repent in sincerity, he would forgive him or her in return for some money. For many a fellow is so hard of heart, he cannot weep for all his inward smart. Therefore, instead of weeping and of prayer, one should give silver for a poor friar's care. Again, if you are a sinner and if you are hard of heart, you can't sweep, you can't you can just give a piece of silver to this person, to this friar, and he will forgive you. He kept his tippet stuffed with pins for curls and pocket knives to give to pretty girls. He was giving money and other stuff and other presents to or gifts to pretty girls, and certainly, which is not a good characteristic of a religious person. And certainly, his voice was gay, and gay here means happy and sturdy, for he sang well and played the hurdy-gurdy at sing-songs. He was champion of the hour. His neck was whiter than a lily flower, but strong enough to butt a bruiser down. He knew the taverns well in every town, and every innkeeper and barmaid too, better than lepers. You know, lepers is a disease. Beggars and lepers are people who have white or white skin. You know this. Beggars and that crew, for in so eminent a man as he, it was not fitting with the dignity of his position dealing with the scum of wretched lepers. Nothing good can come of dealings with the slum and gutter dwellers, but only with the rich and victual sellers. Yani the man was dealing with the high class and the lower class, but anywhere a profit might accrue, anywhere he could might or he might gather money, courteous he was and lowly of service too. He was ready to serve anyone who would give him a small amount of money. Natural gifts like his were hard to match. He was the finest beggar of his batch. He was a beggar. After all, he was a beggar who begged people for money, for food, for anything. And for his begging district, paid rent. His brethren did not poaching or did no poaching where he went. For though a widow mightn't have a shoe, so pleasant was his holy how do you do. He got his farthing from her just the same. Uh, sorry. Before he left, and so his income came to more than he laid out, and how he wronged, just like a puppy, he was ever prompt, and so on to the end of these lines. Somebody is using a drill in the adjacent flat. Thank God he stopped. So to the end of the description of the friar, there was a merchant. Let's move to the merchant. Again, guys, you are supposed to know a little information about each character. You're not supposed to study all this stuff. I'll post a short description of this or a summary of this on SMS. You'll find it in term 3, literature. Okay, don't worry. There was a merchant with a forking beard. A merchant is a rich person who belonged to the middle class at that time. Remember yesterday we said a merchant wasn't allowed to wear fair unless he's 5 times wealthier than a knight. And motley dress, high on his horse he sat, upon his head a Flemish beaver hat, and on his feet daintily buckled boots, is describing his appearance. He told of his opinions and pursuits in solemn tones, and how he never lost. The merchant is proud that he never lost anything. The sea should be kept free at any cost, he thought. Upon the Harwich Holland range, I think there was a war between Holland and England. He was expert at currency exchange. The merchant was expert at currency exchange. This estimable merchant so had set his wits to work, none knew he was in debt, although he looked rich, but he was in debt. We talked about this yesterday. The rich merchant outwardly is rich. Outwardly, if you look at him, at how he is dressed, you would think that you would envy him. You would be, or you would like to be in his place. But inwardly, nobody knew that he was in debt. He was so stately in negotiation, loan, bargain, and commercial obligation. He was an excellent fellow, all the same. To tell the truth, I do not know his name. We don't know the name of anyone. An Oxford cleric, maybe this is another person, still a student though, one who had taken logic long ago, was there. His horse was thinner than a rake. You know, the rake is the tool we use to move the dry leaves of the plants in the garden. And he was not too fat, I undertake, but had a hollow look, a sober stare. I will finish this stanza and end today's session. The thread upon his overcoat was bare. He had found no preferment in the church, and he was too unworldly to make search for secular employment. By his bed, he preferred having 20 books in red. And so this cleric used to read. He was interested in books and black of Aristotle's philosophy. He read about Aristotle, to having fine clothes, fiddle of sultry. Though a philosopher, as I have told, he had not found the stone of making gold. Whatever money from his friends he took, he spent on learning or another book. Whenever this clerk had any money, he spent it on learning and books, and prayed for them most earnestly, returning thanks to them thus for praying for his learning. His only care was study. He cared about nothing but study. And indeed, he never spoke a word more than was need. He didn't say much. He wasn't talkative. Formal at that. Respectful in the extreme. He was very respectful. Short, to the point. His words were, he uttered a few words, and his words were to the point. And lofty in his theme. Lofty in his theme. Yes, we stopped here. The thought of moral virtue filled his speech. So he was, his speech was full of moral virtue, and he would gladly learn and gladly teach. That was all he interested in. So, but the last character we read about here is the cleric, an Oxford cleric, who was interested in learning, reading, studying. Whenever anyone gave him money, he spent it on learning and studying and prayed for those who gave him the money. He didn't say much. He was very respectful, and he uttered a few words, but his words were to the point. I'll stop here. This is the end of page, or maybe the end of page 100. No, 105, sorry. We started 105. Yes, tomorrow we'll start here with the sergeant at the law. Again, guys, we need to know just 2 or 3 lines about each of these characters. You don't need to study, but the 6 vocab items written in blue here are important, like solicitous, absolution, commission, and so on. The drill started again. So I'll stop here. Any question before I end the session?
No.
Ladies?
No.
I know you,
No, thanks.
I know you sort of slept. I know it's boring, but I'm so sorry. Any question, ladies? Any question, gentlemen?
Thank you, Rasta.
So I want just to know who is not with us. 2 people are outside the room now. I just want to know who they are. I still have, because I have 3 or 4 minutes. Let me check the attendance. I have Dahrouk, Matar, Rashwan, Danielle,
ايوه
Hania, Jana, Karim, Luji, Mariam, Maya, Minna, Mirna, Abu al-Farh, Kiki, Nada, Omar, Basant, Peter. So where is Yusuf? Yusuf is not here. He joined at the beginning of the session. Yusuf is not in the room now, I think.
Yusuf is here.
Yes, Yusuf is here. I saw him now. Type. Who is absent then? Two people are outside the room. Who are they? Can anybody help me? Okay, I'll take print screen and then cover for myself because I think, okay, Summer is here now. Right, thank you very much. I'll end the session. See you tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.